Hey friends, welcome back to my channel. If you're new here, my name is Rakan, product designer working in London, and in this super casual video I want to talk about the topic of measuring the wider impact of your designs and the ethics behind them. I feel like in the tech industry and as a designer, everything's so metrics oriented and everything's about the impact that you've made as a designer, but then people usually forget about the wider impact on society. We're so focused on daily active users, the amount of engagement increase we've got, average session durations. But what about the wider impact on society? How does this affect, for example, if your product turned an overnight success, what would happen to people's health or well-being? What would happen to the environment? What would happen to laws and legislations? Would people suddenly lose their jobs? We're going to look at Tarot's cards of tech, where we can explore some of these questions and use a few case studies. We'll probably look at things like Uber Eats, Deliveroo, Airbnb, things in the gig economy, and maybe some other tech companies as examples. Be sure to subscribe for future design related videos, and let's get started. So first of all, let's start with the Tarot's card of Mother Nature. So this card states that if the environment was your client, how would your product change? We're going to use Uber here. What feedback would the environment give about your product, and what is the most unsustainable behavior your product encourages? So if I was the environment, one thing I'd notice is inside mega cities is there's definitely been a massive increase in the amount of vehicles on the road, well, especially taxi journeys because of Uber. They're making it way easier for people to get taxis. And inside those taxis is usually one person in one car, adding more cars on the road. That person would normally might have taken a bus or maybe have taken a train instead, which is a lot more sustainable as you can fit more people into a bus or a train and uses way less fuel. So if I was the environment, I'd definitely be a bit concerned about Uber scaling up, and it's not very environmentally friendly with the amount of journeys they're pushing. So what would I do as a designer here, realizing as I scale up, it's actually not that great for the environment. So one thing Uber have started to encourage is having electric vehicles and their fleets and trying to make their fleets fully electric, which does reduce the amount of carbon emissions. However, there's still more vehicles on the road. We need to encourage people to look at other modes of transport. So what about having a bigger emphasis of using other ride sharings like multimodal journeys? For example, why not use an Uber bike and then maybe take an Uber at the end of your journey, or only part of your journey could be an Uber, you could use an electric scooter on the other part, or maybe use a metro at some of your journey and then get an Uber right at the end. Reality is that it is unsustainable adding more vehicles on the road here. Next up, let's look at the card for smash hit. So what happens when 100 million people use your product? What would mass scale usage of your product reveal or cause? How might a community change if 80% of residents use your product? Or how could habits and norms change? So let's use Airbnb as an example here. So Airbnb allows you to rent homes around the world in especially pretty remote locations where you don't need to rely on hotels, and you can get quote unquote more of a local experience. However, what this has resulted in is that hundreds of millions of people now use Airbnb, and they've now basically gone to small quaint towns, imagine in the countryside in a peaceful location, and loads of tourists have now started to rent Airbnbs in those areas where before it's just a peaceful little village, and they've started to draw a lot of tourism to the area. And what does that mean? That some people might have just moved there, the locals that have lived there for peace, for some quiet. The noise pollution has probably gone up significantly, they drive up rent prices, and it's just not a nice experience for the locals knowing that they moved here and now it's just become a tourist town because of Airbnb. And Airbnb have carried on scaling, and it's something they really need to bear in mind is they need to maybe contact the locals in the area before they decide to allow people to scale up on this platform in this area. Because the reality is that you could be in a seaside town and then one year is a perfect place, your dream home, and the next year Airbnb comes along and basically makes it a tourist hotspot, and it's basically turned to hell for you. So that's a wider impact of Airbnb. Like, it may seem as a smash hit, it's an amazing app, don't get me wrong, but the wider impact, there needs to be more done here. And I don't think when designing this you may not have thought of this, and it's important to think about things like this as you scale up as a designer. So next up, let's talk about Uber and the Radio Star. So the Radio Star, the card says who or what disappears if your product is successful, who loses their jobs, what other products or services are replaced, what industries, institutions or policies would be affected. So simply with Uber, we can see the whole black cab protests around cities, and famously in London there was a massive protest with the black cabs, and Uber was banned for a few months. Same with in Germany as well. So as good as Uber has been, it has resulted in people losing jobs when it has become really popular. Same with Uber Eats. What has Uber Eats when scaling up, what has happened is that local restaurants have had to close because they can't compete with the bigger chains with the takeaway options that Uber and Uber Eats and Deliveroo and all these companies, the fees they take, the food that they make is barely profitable anymore compared to when people would go to them directly for takeaway options. So as good as these tech products are, you need to think about what would happen if your product became insanely popular and what are the consequences for this, and there are going to be jobs on the line here. So the last card I'm going to look at is the scandal. What's the worst headline about your product you can imagine? So what about your business model would concern users most? In what scenarios could your product cause harm or endanger people? If your product was entirely used opposite of what it's intended, what does that look like? So famously, we can see the mental health impacts of using social networks. If you're using either Instagram, TikTok, Snapchat, any of them, the mental health impact has resulted in younger people leading to severe depression, illnesses and suicide, and tech companies, I feel like, need to always do more to help out here. And that is honestly a massive scandal, because as long they have created a product and they should be responsible for the consequences here. And as a designer, you may be looking at increasing user engagement, but at what cost? Massive mental health impacts here. Continuing on with the scandal, let's look at autonomous vehicles and self-driving cars. Let's look at, for example, Tesla and other companies that have self-driving vehicles. What has resulted in big scandals is the fact that people have left these vehicles to drive by themselves, and they've gone asleep in the back of the car, or they've put their seat rolled back and taken a complete nap, and the vehicle's going 100 miles per hour, 80 miles per hour, and they've put other people's lives at risk, and the vehicle's crashed into either a tree or into someone, and basically that's other people's lives have unfortunately passed away. And I feel like honestly manufacturers are responsible for this as well. So this is quite an extreme example, but as AVs are starting to roll out, it's something that's being questioned every single day. There's road accidents caused by humans every single day, but then I feel like there's a lot of public pressure when it's caused by autonomous vehicles and by basically machine learning and AI. So this is another thing that we have to consider when designing. I hope you found this video useful. I really enjoyed running through Tarot's card of tech. There's a Spotify framework, I'll link it in the description below, where you can run a workshop with your team to talk through these cards with your product managers, with wider managers and with your peers, and really think with this feature that I'm releasing, that the product I'm working on, what is really the wider impact? What are the mental health impacts? If my product turned to overnight success, why was someone overuses my product whose jobs are on the line here? It's really important to think of the deeper and wider impact as a designer. We're in such an amazing position to influence this as well. So be sure to subscribe for future design related videos. Give it a thumbs up if you found it useful. Comment below if you've learned something new, and I'll catch you guys in the next video. Peace out.